You guys know that feeling when you finish a really good book and then the last chapter kind of kicks your ass and you have to think about it for a while before you can talk about it? Yeah, I could have took about another week to think about this one, but I want to get out there and get the discussion going. So we're going to do some non-spoiler thoughts now. She was not a woman to be deterred by hatred. Not from her workers, not from her rivals, not from the men she bullied, bribed, or blackmailed to get her way. It is when they truly hate you, after all, that you know you have won. So she met the seethe dislike with effortless superiority, paraded past with shoulders back and chin high. If she was to be cast as the villain, so be it. They were always the most interesting characters anyway. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike here, and today we're going to be talking about the 7th novel and 8th overall story set in the First Law universe by Joe Abercrombie. This is a kind of a new format we got going on. Just listen to you guys. I listen to feedback. Like I said, I never meant for this to be a booktube channel. This was something I began to kind of just keep up reference points for Wheel of Time, make my way through that so I wouldn't forget everything. By the time I was on book like 15, when there was like, you've read 4 million words and you just want to remember what happened in what book. But I just kept going based off of feedback. Feedback says, hey, make a spoiler review, make a non-spoiler review. That's what everybody wants me to do. So this will be my non-spoiler review of A Little Hatred by Joe Abercrombie. And even if you haven't read any of the books, I don't know what you're doing watching a video that is on the 7th novel in this series to know if I recommend the book or not. Obviously, if I'm this far in, I'm going to recommend the book regardless of what happens. But if there are spoilers in this, it will be very minor spoilers for the 6 books that came before this. I might let something creep out that you don't want to know about, like if a character lived or died. So again, if you guys intend to read this series, and you definitely should, it is, besides Lord of the Rings, there is no fantasy series I recommend more than the First Law. So if you don't want to know absolutely anything, don't watch any of these reviews. Go back and read the books, read those reviews. I have reviewed every single First Law story on this channel. I'll put that playlist up here so you guys can find it if this is your first time finding the channel. But this will be non-spoiler, except a couple of things might come out like, hey, this character is still alive and you didn't want to know that. So that's on you if you're watching a non-spoiler review, even if you haven't read the first 6 or 7 books in this series. So with that, I'm just going to say up front, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about here in a non-spoilery way. I just thought I would kind of give the, just put the camera on and see what happens, because it took me about a week to read this book. A lot of personal things were going on, but also just because, I waited about a decade for the sequel to the original trilogy in this series, and I wanted to make sure I didn't just burn through it in like an afternoon, like is very possible with a Joe Abercrombie book. So I kind of took my time. I did about 100 pages or 70 pages a day, something like that. I don't know what the math is there. I just know it took me 4.5 days after the release date to finish. And I was going to do my non-spoiler thoughts like right after. Then I read the last like 30 pages. And yeah, I needed to let it marinate for a little bit because I'm not overselling it here when I said that I was numb. I was numb by the final 2 pages of this book. You went into it knowing that you might lose some of those. I mean, this is Joe Abercrombie. He holds nothing dear. You guys think that George R.R. Martin is ruthless? You have no idea. You have no idea. Joe doesn't hold very many things sacred, I don't think. So nothing is off of the table. And I knew that we were going to probably lose some of our originals, our beloved characters in this. But the way that something happened at the end of this book just completely knocked my socks off. And it got me to the point where I was like, hey, be careful what you wish for. Because while I am extremely happy he's continuing this series, because, I thought Red Country was going to be the last book that he ever wrote in this series. I'm absolutely just like, okay, but you knew what you're going to get with Joe. You're going to get some heartbreak. You're going to get some ruthlessness. You're going to get some savage storytelling, and you got all that but in the good way. I know it sounds like that might sound like a negative. It's definitely not, because I mean that's the way that Joe writes. And that's what makes him different than the other fantasy authors out there and the other grimdark fantasy authors out there. That's why I think he is appropriately named Lord Grimdark, because I feel like he is definitely leading the charge on this genre, and there's been so many imitations. And you see all of these reviews on like book. I feel like I said on my when I first did my why you should read the First Law trilogy, and if you guys haven't seen that, I'll put that video up here for you. What I said in that was, I know that this series has a following, because he isn't writing the 8th book in this series, and there's no one buys these books. It has a cult following, but I don't feel like it gets the accolades and attention that it deserves. I feel like the attention that something like Patrick Rothfuss gets is the attention that Joe Abercrombie should get, because he's that good. He's that incredible of a writer, and his universe is just second to none. It's just fantastic. Someone asked me to sell it to him. I said, hey, imagine Game of Thrones without dragons and without all of the prophecy BS. And other people said, wow, that sounds really cool. Exactly. So, did I say Lord of the Rings? I meant Game of Thrones. Did I say Lord of the Rings? I don't even know. Like I said, this is what happens when you do live video. I meant Game of Thrones, obviously, if that's not what I said. But non-spoiler thoughts on this book. First off, should you read this book? If you are invested in this series, absolutely. I think it was a fellow booktuber, I think Nick's Corner. I'll link him in the comments. I don't really remember the actual name of the page, Nick. We talk on Goodreads a lot. But he's just getting started, so I like to give him a shout out, because hey, I'm really new at this, and I'd like to just pay it forward any way that I can, because it's hard for some of us booktubers to get going on here, to get in front of the camera live like this and just ramble. You start rambling like I'm doing right now. If you are invested to this point where you know these characters, you know these locations, and you love them, it's about like chapter 5, where's what I told Nick. I told him it was this far into the story where I said, my God, I'm home. It felt like no time had passed. Even though this book takes place 28 years after the last book in the original trilogy and 15 years after the last book, Red Country, it feels like no time has passed, even though we've been waiting a decade for this, which is something I never thought. I can't say I've been waiting a decade for the sequel, because I never thought he was going to go back to it. It really did feel like just slipping back on a comfortable pair of pants or something that you haven't been able to fit into for a long time. Because I felt right at home right away. It felt like he wrote this the day after he finished Last Argument of Kings. It fit together seamlessly. The writing's the same. The feel is the same. Nothing has changed. There is no, oh, we're doing something a little different. No, if you want something different, go read Red Country. That was a little different. This feels like the original trilogy. And it's way too early to rank something like this, but it is my favorite since the original trilogy. I love Best Served Cold, and I thought that it stood with the original trilogy, but I think this is right there with it, if not above it. You've got 7 new POV characters. Rika, which I pronounced wrong most of it, and then someone told me at the end he actually says he keeps on teasing Rika. It rhymes with something, and she always gets cut off or something like that. And you finally get the end. I was like, wow, I've been saying Rick the whole book, but it's Rika, Rikke. It's pronounced Rika. I won't tell you the relation because that could be a spoiler. How these characters all tie in with the original trilogy characters, they do, and it fits. So I won't tell you what any of the relations are if you can't figure it out right away. Leo Dan Brock, very, very interesting character. I don't know how to do spoilers on this without talking about these guys. Savine Dan Glokta, obviously, if you're a fan of First Law, you understand who and what this character is and why people were anticipating reading about this character so much. I'll just say apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Let's put it there. Crown Prince Orso. Obviously, if you know how the original trilogy ends, you know who this is. Jonas Clover, that's kind of our viewpoint into the north with this one. Gets to be the eye of a lot of returning characters, some that I did not expect to see because so much time has passed. But, in this world, being 60 years old might not be that big of a deal. It actually is quite surprising because it seems like everybody dies really, really young in these books. Then you got Victorine Dan Teufel, a relation to a character in the brief character in the very first book, and Gunnar broad, which is kind of our heavy in this book. Again, doing non-spoiler is kind of new to me. I'm trying to get it to a way where that there are 7 new characters. They all tie into those original characters in a way. Some that you'd expect and some you're actually rather surprised with. But it never feels forced. Never. And Joe's ability to create new characters and make you give a shit about them right away. It's both amazing and awful. Amazing because you'd be like, oh, it's like when you go see your favorite band. Like I went and saw Iron Maiden for the first time in my life the other night. And they were playing, it's based on their greatest hits tour, and they played something newer, and everyone was just like, play the old stuff. With this, it kind of felt like you want him to play the old stuff, but you like his new characters so quickly that you're able to just latch onto them. And why I say it's awful is because you know that there's not going to be a happy ending for these characters. Every time you think there's going to be a happy ending for a character in these books, he pulls the rug out from underneath of you. So, again, I liked all of the new characters. I have to say Orso is probably my favorite one of the newbies. But you see so many returning characters in this. I have to give an obligatory shout out to Steve Pacey, who does the audiobooks. I do not listen to audiobooks, guys. I have serious ADD when it comes to listening. I only can pay attention when I'm reading something. So, but everyone is going to say, you gotta listen to the audiobook. I think the 50% of the comments I get on First Law videos are, you should really listen to Stephen Pacey. I'm sure he's amazing. Not that many. I mean, it's unanimous across the board. Everyone says he's one of the best in the business. So, I'm just going to put that out there. I'm going to cut you off in front and say, no, I did not listen to Stephen Pacey because I don't listen to audiobooks. But apparently he's amazing. So if you've got the Audible credits, go for it. Go for it. Sounds like, from what people tell me, he's the best way to experience this universe outside of actually reading the book. And some say they prefer that. I obviously don't do that, so I cannot confirm or deny. I've listened to some sound clips. Very interesting, some of the voices that he's came up for some of these characters. So I can see why people like it. I just wanted to get that out there. That no, I did not listen to the audiobook. I read the story. The ending of this is so shocking in a way that you didn't think Joe could shock you anymore. That I went into saying, like, bring your worst, Joe. I can take it. And I read the title of the last chapter, and I said, don't you fucking dare, Joe. And sure enough, it was coming. It was one of those things that was hard for me to keep reading because I knew it was about to happen. And man, I don't want to say I hated it because I hate it, but I love the book, And it's not like one of those things where I'm like, oh, I liked it all except this. No, I liked it. I hated to see it happen because it's a character that's just beloved by me. So it was really, really, really rough to take. So if you want to decipher that based off my old videos, you can just wait for my spoiler video that I'll put up here when I'm done with it. My spoiler video. I say that the first act of this is like introduction. It's getting you setting up the chessboard. It's getting all of the new characters situated where they're at, kind of giving you. He doesn't hold your hand and say, hey, he doesn't give you like a new character. He doesn't do like Wheel of Time. He doesn't recap the previous books. He just flat out just goes for it. Do I think you could read this being new to the universe? I think you could. I don't know if it would have the emotional impact with you. Like the ending would be like, whatever to you. Like I said, that would be like if you never read The Hobbit and you're supposed to be emotionally attached to Bilbo at the beginning of Lord of the Rings. You're like, why should I care? That kind of thing. Do you have to read the standalones? I recommend it. I definitely recommend you at least do Best Served Cold because they make several references to characters and events in that book in this one. So I still say you should read at least the first 5 if you've got time. Red Country, I think you guys, I got a lot of pushback on how I felt about that book. If you are a fan of the heroes, I think you'll like the middle chapter, the middle act of this book, because the middle act of this book is a lot of waiting for the battle. And he does do as Gandalf would say, the deep breath before the plunge. Joe does that so well. But there's a point sometimes for some people where it's like, okay, I'm tired of waiting for the battle. I'm ready for the battle. But Joe sets up the board so good. And then the third act is just that typical First Law. You can't stop reading. It's just a page turner in that third act. And when you get to that final couple chapters, man, you're gonna be distraught. If you're anything like, if you had the experience with the original trilogy that I had, you're gonna be distraught. So I definitely would recommend. Like I said, if I'm ranking them, I'm going to put it right up there with the first 3 books. I definitely cannot rank the series as a whole right now because it's still too new. This is the kind of thing that this is the first of a trilogy. Someone already talked to Joe on Twitter and said, "I hate to be that guy, but can we know when book 2 is coming out in this trilogy?" And he says September 2020. So he's going to put out apparently one of each of these a year apart. He's the anti-Rothfuss and the anti-George R.R. Martin. He's going to put out one every September going forward. So it feels like it would be incomplete to grade this when it's book 1 of 3 in a trilogy. So, do I say it can stand alone? I wouldn't say really. They aren't really meant to be standalones. I mean, if it's part of a trilogy, he knows. I feel like all the best fantasy standalones are ones where they didn't know they were going to get a book 2 or 3. And they just wrote like a standalone story, with a trap door where they could go back if they wanted to. This definitely feels like part 1 of the story, and big old cliffhanger ending. So we'll see what's going to happen going forward. I loved it. It felt like hanging out with an old friend again. I think the way I put it was, it's like meeting up with some of your old high school friends, and they have kids now, and you're meeting their kids, and you're getting to know their kids. That's what this felt like to me, because there's so many familiar and familial relationships in this that you will. If you're a fan of the series, you're going to feel right at home, and I think you're going to have a blast with this. So if you want to know the actual plot details, I'm going to do my spoiler review next. And that will probably be a little more structured than this, because I'll actually know what I'm going to talk about without trying to tap dance around everything. Like I said, this is something new I'm trying. When you got the good old YouTube algorithm that sees people shutting off your video halfway through because they don't want to know spoilers, YouTube just assumes, well, your videos aren't very interesting, you can't retain an audience. So another fellow recommended that I split these up. So that's what I'm going to try to do going forward. Want to make sure that you don't miss any of those. Please, guys, hit subscribe. I'm well on the goal to that goal I had of 1,000 before the end of the year. Looks like I might actually get to that. It was over 900 before I started this, and that's crazy. I never thought that would happen. So I appreciate you guys. Please like, share, give comments, anything you can do. I'm here to talk to you guys. If you want to talk spoilers, look for that other video. I'd like to keep the spoiler comments in the spoiler video. If you want to do the non-spoiler comments in this one, that's preferable. But guys, I can't control what people put in the comment. Or I'm not going to control. I'm not going to moderate the comments and tell people you put a spoiler, I'm going to delete your comment. Because any comment I get on these videos, I'm going to talk to people about them, because that's why I'm here. I'm here to talk to you guys. I'm not here to listen to myself talk. So thank you guys for watching, and we will talk to you with that spoiler video very, very soon.